So one of the questions we have, and you might ask me when we're talking about this, is why rock the garden? Why should I consider doing this? And obviously one of the very first reasons is for the photography. I mean, I've just got some really pretty photos, and I'm going to tempt you with those. And it's very attractive in winter. Rock looks good in summer or in winter. Rock is a natural mulch. It displaces weeds and it reduces watering. One of the nice things about rock gardens is you don't have to water as much. It holds soil on a slope. And a rock garden is the only real way to grow some natives that hate clay and silt. So many of us who are into native plants have tried over the years and know about plants that just will not grow in clay and silt and have died in our wet winters. Well, that's very common. So rock garden is a way to grow those plants. It also, for those of you who are thinking about landscaping, it reduces the fire hazard near the house. Rocks don't burn. Now for me, the real reason I got into it was after my patio project, I had a bunch of leftover stone. And I had these old pine stumps around the patio that were still sitting there that had from pine trees that had taken down during the ice storm of 2010 or whenever that was. And they were just sitting there, and I said, oh wow, maybe I could take some of this rock and pile it up on top of the stones and mix, and voila, that was my first rock garden. So that's how it started. So now we know why we might be interested, but why? What is it that plants get out of a rock garden? And I think this is kind of interesting. It's surprising how favorable an environment rock can be for plants. First, rock shades and cools the soil. It also traps, as you can see here, it traps leaves and dust and pollen and soil all around it. And over time, the rock weathers into small flakes and grains. And even small amounts of minerals like potassium, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium leach into the soil from the rock. If you look at some soil surveys of Guilford County soils, you'll see that there's different kinds of rock underlying the soils, and often the acidity of the soil, some soils are acid, and part of the reason is that because that's a type of rock that has a lot of magnesium or iron in it that underlies that soil. There are also neutral soils in Guilford County, and there are very few alkaline soils in Guilford County, all because of the rocks that underlie it. So rocks are contributing to the nutrition of the soil. Here we have a picture of a really good rock garden plant. This used to be called Manfreda, the Manfreda virginica. It's now been reclassified. It's always known to be similar to agaves of the West. But this is now, it's so similar genetically that they've said, hey, this really is an agave, an eastern agave. So it's now called agave virginica, and the only way you're going to grow this is in gravelly, rocky soil. It is native to North Carolina. I should mention that I prefer to use natives in Piedmont, North Carolina. They're from Piedmont, and really I'll go anywhere in the Southeast. Piedmont region of the Southeast. I think they will do the best. They're already here, they're native here, and that's my preference. But I will look at, because of global warming, I will look at coastal species along our coasts and as far in the Gulf Coast as well. And I think those plants will contribute to survival and will be able to survive as we continue to warm up. And it's a really sad statement, but it's a reality we have to deal with. Rock also allows plants to sink their roots deep down underneath through gaps to find moisture and nutrients. And probably one of the most important things is they reduce competition from big plants. If you're a small plant and you got a rock next to you, there's not a big plant going to come up there and shade you out. So you'll find that rock garden plants are often small. And that's going to be one of the features you'll want to exploit in your garden. So there are many different kinds of types of rock gardens, and you'll see them in books and all kinds. And I'm going to explore a few, and I'm going to give my own names to some of these. They're not necessarily the official name. So we'll start with what I call the edge garden, and this is the simplest one of all and the easiest to do. So we have on the right a robin's plantain. This is my edge of my patio. And so the very first thing I did when I put in this patio is said, oh, look, let's put something along the edge. And what you do is you just, it was actually already there. When they lay a patio or a driveway or a sidewalk, they put down gravel first. So usually on that edge, you've already got gravel and sand, which is a rock art. So you just plant it. If you don't, you dig out the clay or the silt that's there, and you put in gravel or sand. And you're done. That's a rock that you plant in your rock garden. Robin's plantain is it's a low-growing plant. It looks beautiful almost all year. It's evergreen, and that's a great plant to use. North Carolina native. And so is Carolina campion, Silene caroliniana. This one happens to be growing in one of our members' driveways, and I took a picture of it. I just said, wow, that looks great along this driveway. It's an asphalt driveway, and this is John Neal's driveway. He's given me permission to give his name. And thank you, John, for letting me take that picture. But it's thriving. Look how big this plant has gotten. It loves it there. And it's sending its roots. You don't see them, but they're going underneath the driveway to get to that moisture. And if you've ever pulled up a Carolina campion, its roots can be 6 or 8 inches long, and they're thick. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But here you go. It's easy. Okay, you can do a really simple little rock garden right along your sidewalk or your driveway. It's very easy. So this I call a gleaming gravel garden because I just want to see how people can say it really fast, right? And I've seen these in books, and Japanese gravel gardens are pretty common. People know about those. And I accidentally created one. Do you see the small yellow indigo? It's called Baptisia tinctoria. It has a little small yellow bloom, beautiful little plant, has to be dry. And I had it in sort of a sandy soil, but I had 5 of them, and they weren't growing very well. And last winter, accidentally, I was moving some gravel around, and I just set a pile of it on the side, on the edge of where I thought these were growing, but I accidentally covered one of them up, about 3 inches of gravel. And this is the plant, and it grew about a foot high and about 1.5 feet wide in one season, and the other 4 plants that were not covered just sort of fritzed around. So you can create a gravel garden if you want to, just by dumping 3 inches of gravel on some of your plants. I don't think they all will do this well. The Baptisia is pretty tough, but this plant liked being covered by gravel. Now why? I think it gave it a shadier, cooler environment for its roots. And when it rains, the rain just goes right through that gravel, it wets that soil, and it stays wetter a little bit longer for that particular plant. This is in a very hot, dry, sunny area because that's what Tinctoria likes, but despite that, it did not grow until I covered it with a little bit of gravel. Now, normally what you want to do is you put 3 to 5 inches of gravel and mix it with some sand, and you plant the plant so that its crown is flush with the top of the gravel. But in this case, I just buried it, and it still grew. Now, I have an area that I've always had in my yard where I've grown yucca, and it's under pine trees. So pine trees are very dry soil. And what can you grow under a pine tree? Well, you can grow yucca, muley grass, baptisia, aromatic asters, liatris. And so I've just put a whole bunch of liatris out here, so I'm really excited about having some blazing stars blooming in the summer out in this area. So again, this is just gravelly soil under pine trees. So you may already have some pine, just throw in some gravel and go planting. And if you don't like yucca, some people don't, you can use muley grass and liatris and baptisias and aromatic asters, and wild quinine will grow in this environment. There's lots and lots of plants to choose. So now we're going to get to some of the fun stuff. So there's actually 2 different types of gardens here, but they're very similar in a way. There's the shale barren and the pathway garden. Both of these have flat stones. These are slate I had a sidewalk that I tore up. It was getting cracked, and you know how stone gets after 20. It was 25 years old. It's really getting cracked and ugly. So I just tore it out and replaced it. And so you have this pile of old slate. What do I do with it? So I made a mound of soil and then put the flat slate down, and I put plants in between. And this is mimicking a type of environment that's common in central Appalachians. They're called shale barrens. Instead of slate, they have a similar rock, but it's more crumbly, called shale. It's a sedimentary rock, crumbles easily. And there's a whole list of species that are uniquely adapted to that shale. So this is a kind of an imitation of that shale barren, except I'm using slate. And in between the slate again is giving it areas that weeds can't grow. It's giving it a place to put their roots underneath, and I plant the plants in between them. And we can look through here, and I'll help by pointing out some of these. Marshallia, barbarous buttons. This is the flower, and here's the plant growing up there. It does really well in almost all the rock gardens I'll be talking about. This is a plant a lot of people don't know a lot about. It's called pine weed sometimes. It will grow into pines, and it's a native to my yard. It just appeared. It almost looks like grass and has a very tiny yellow bloom on it. But it's architecturally kind of pretty in a rock garden. Hypericum gentianoides is what it's called. Sedge, surprisingly, sedges will grow in rock gardens. Special ones. Now, we're going to focus here. Almost all my rock gardens are full sun. And I'm doing that. You can do them in shade, you can do them in bogs, you can do rock gardens, everything. But I'm thinking, I want something different. I want something where plants I could normally not grow. And a lot of people have these sunny spots where they can't get anything to grow. So I'm really talking today mostly about sun-loving plants. So sedges normally don't like sun, but here we have some Carex texensis because it can get its roots down underneath that rock where there's moisture. And this is a particularly good sedge. It's pretty tough. It will grow in a rock garden. It's a nice short sedge. So there's another Carex called Carex bromoides, and I think I have a picture of that later. Very similar looking though. Will also grow in a rock garden. And one of my favorite rock garden plants is the eastern columbine. You can just see a few leaves of it here. It's probably finished blooming when I took this picture. It's an early spring bloomer. And Penstemon hirsutus. There's actually a couple blooms of it from a plant here. The main part, that's the foliage of another plant. And I don't think you can quite see the blooms on it. They're just budding up. So those are some really nice rock garden plants. And I'm just going to show you a sample of those just so you can get an idea of them. But another fairly easy project. These stones don't weigh a lot, 5 to 10 pounds. You mound up some sandy soil underneath them. You can use gravel. You can use a mixture of sand, gravel, and humus. And stuff that you can never grow will grow in this. Now, one theme you're going to hear me say throughout is pile it up on top of your clay. Do not dig it into the clay. Do not mix it with your clay. You want it sitting on top in a pile. The clay is down here, sitting it up in a pile so that the water drains down and out. You want it to drain and dry out after a rain, slowly. And I also call it a pathway. You can make a pathway the same way. It's really the same thing. It's just flatter. But I'll raise the pathway about 3 inches above the ground around it. Again, you want some drainage. So now we're going to talk about crevice rock gardens. Now you can go down to Plant Delight's nursery other side of Raleigh, and they've really got a lot of crevice gardens. And a lot of botanical gardens are starting to put these in. And I don't have a picture of them, but this illustration kind of shows you. You have these rocks. They could be concrete slabs, salvaged concrete slabs. And they set them in at an angle, and then you fill it in with your topsoil, sandy soil, and you can put your plants in there. And they are just almost all the plants you'll talk about today will grow in those crevices. And again, you see how it's sitting on top of the clay? We're not mixing it in the clay. And this drains really well. So that's a crevice garden. But what I don't have a lot of concrete slabs around my house yet. I'm sure I'll do a project sometime and I'll have some. But anyway, so I don't have any now. But what I do have is a bunch of irregular stones in my yard. There are granitic or volcanic outcrops throughout the Piedmont Triad. They're all over. We also have mountaintops. You can see them, and you can be driving along Highway 62, and you'll see piles of rocks. You'll see streams that suddenly in the Piedmont cascade over an old volcanic dike that runs across that creek. So they're everywhere, and my yard is full of them. So I have these irregularly shaped, they're not granite, they're actually probably diabase, which is a volcanic rock that it's a little bit coarser than granite, but similar minerals. And I call them field stones. And you can just pile those up, and I'll show you a little bit more about how to do that. But similarly, you're going to put soil in between them and plant plants in the crevice. So it's a type of crevice garden, but I'll call it a rock pile from here on. So you start with a flat site. So you want to clear it. You want to make sure there are no plants in the area. You don't want it in the shade of trees or trees that will grow up and be big and shaded out. And one thing you really want to do is get rid of the wild onions. I'm telling you, this is the voice of experience. Get rid of them before you make the rock garden. And so now, we're going to pile up some gravelly soil. This can be like just all gravel and sand. You can mix a little bit of humus in it. This is going to be the base, so it doesn't have to have much humus in it. And you want it higher in the middle. And again, you make a mound of it so that the water will come down and drain out the sides. And again, don't dig it into the yard. You want to pile it on top.
This is before and after?
This is before and later before, yes.
So where are you getting the sandy soil that you put down?
So the sandy soil I'm using, you can really use almost any sand. I'm using the worst possible sand. I'm using paver sand that they deliver in a dump truck. I have a pile, I don't know, I bought 8 cubic feet of it or something. And I have a huge sand pile, and it's orange. So it has a lot of silt in it. But the silt does wash out over time. And if I mix it with gravel, now the gravel I'm using, you got 2 choices. You got really 3 kinds of gravel you can use. If you're just a small garden, you can use pea gravel from the box. You can get a bag of pea gravel from the box stores. All right, so again, the sand, paver sand, play sand's better, I agree. So if you're doing a smaller rock garden, just buy a bunch of bags. And for one this size, you could get 5-10 bags of play sand, and that's great. Again, it needs to be washed out, but the rain will do a lot of that for you. This is not like a bog garden. If I were doing a bog garden, I would absolutely wash the sand completely. They cannot stand minerals. Rock plants are different. They're more tolerant of minerals and salts. All right. And the gravel could be pea gravel from the box stores. It can be, there are 2 types of paver type gravel. One is it's like an inch or ½ inch. That's what you make sidewalks, underlay the sidewalks and your asphalt pavement and all has that type of rock underlying it. There's also 1/4 inch gravel. And that's what I like, and that's what's here. And it's what you see on a path. You see some of the paths in Greensboro parks. They're using what I call pathway gravel. It's 1/4 inch, and you can get it by the truckload or smaller. So you'll have to pay the same fee. I forget what they charge. Depends on how far you are from the quarry and the people with the dump truck. But if you only needed a few cubic feet, you still might have to pay a $75 delivery fee. But in the scheme of things, that's not a whole lot of money in terms of creating a garden. So here below, we've added more rocks all around. And you'll notice they're not touching each other. And that's so I can fill in between them with topsoil. Now the topsoil is going to be about 1/3 to 3/4 of humus, a lot more humus, and the rest could be gravel or a mixture of gravel and sand.
What's the scale on this?
This is about 6 feet across. 6 feet, about 6 feet in diameter.
So you don't use just gravel, you use topsoil?
I will mix it with some kind of humus. They do like rock garden places. We see them growing in the wild. If you go up to the mountains and you see rocky places, just look at what you see in nature. And again, I'm trying to recreate a little bit of nature. If you look in nature, you'll see that leaves decay and they kind of form a little bit of humus mixed in with the gravelly soil. So the topsoil, the top 3 inches, down at the bottom picture, this top 3 inches is a mixture of some humus and gravel and sand. So those of you who are Martians, it's really important for you to know, and people often think I'm a Martian. Gravity is real important here. Gravity is a real drag when you're hauling big rocks around. So you want good tools. Do not fill your wheelbarrow full. Do not. Even with sand or rock, it's going to be 3 or 4 times heavier than a wheelbarrow full of mulch. It's just too heavy. So I fill my wheelbarrow about 1/3 full, and I just make more trips. I use a hand truck for the big rocks. I don't lift them, I roll them. You roll them onto the hand truck, you wheel them to where you want them, and you roll them off. Now, a rock that weighs 60 pounds, if you're just rolling it, it's about 30 pounds. Most of us can handle, roll a rock with about 30 pounds of tug to get it to roll. It's about half of the full weight. No one here, certainly not me, so a few of you, Adam, you can do it, could lift a 60-pound rock. So I just don't. Just don't bother with it. So have good tools. It's handy to have crowbars to pry it out of the ground. Some of mine are half buried. Hand trucks, wheelbarrows, sturdy boots, gloves, and at the end of the day, a deep tissue back massager. Could be your partner. And roll and wobble rocks where you want them. Stretch frequently, bend your knees, stop when tired. And you can pick up smaller rocks, but again, do it the right way, bend your knees, just take care of yourself. And if you have really big rocks, if you see, you find somebody who has the really big ones, okay, I gotta have those. Hire a backhoe. Just go out and hire one. They're not outrageous. You're gonna spend a little money, but it's okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about design. How do you design a garden? Because this is kind of important. My first recommendation is don't overplant it, though. Your first year, you're going to kind of experiment. And species grow differently in rock, usually shorter than they do in regular soil. Some species grow in both places. Some of the species you have out in your garden, you can grow in rock, but they're going to grow shorter and a little differently, and they may bloom a little differently. So don't overplant it. Experiment, use a variety of species when you're doing this. Now, from the top left up there, that's the Appalachian blazing star, not blooming yet. It's a really nice rock garden plant. It's Liatris microcephala. Then we have the heartleaf skullcap, which is a beautiful little plant. You don't normally think of being in rock gardens. It'll grow out in regular soil easily, but it loves a rock garden. I have it coming up this year. It's coming back. It's spreading a little bit. It has those beautiful purple veins on it, the Scutellaria ovata. Really nice plant. And then there's some Penstemon pallidus, I think, up in the top right corner. The penstemons are great. Pallidus and hirsutus are both two really nice. These are just great rock garden plants. And then, I'm not sure where my right down in the bottom right, there's the wild lupin, which has not bloomed yet, but it's living. And you cannot grow that anywhere else other than super well-drained soil. And then the downy tickseed, Coreopsis pubescens, which blooms all summer. It's a really pretty plant. It's a low-growing Coreopsis, so it's perfect for a rock garden. So a few rules for planting. Plant in the fall, winter, or early spring. This is important. Well-drained soils do not frost heave. They don't. I've been planting all winter. You can plant them in the dead of winter. The frost doesn't heave them out. So that's kind of a nice thing about rock gardens. You want to keep some rock faces clear because you want to see rock. You see, I didn't put plants every single spot. Give them some space. It's good to take photos monthly because the next year, years 2 and 3, you kind of want to, oh, I like this one, and this one blooms at this time of year, and this one blooms at this time of year, and that's when you start really kind of planning out what you want it to look like. So take some photos so you know, and you can always have something blooming and always have something green. You want plants that are green in the winter because rocks look great in the winter. All right. So, what are the traits of plants that make them survive? How do they survive in rock gardens? What is it about them? So, one of the anybody want to guess? What is it about plants that you see in rock gardens or rocky areas that you don't see in your garden so much? What is it about them that's different? Anybody want to guess?
Competition?
That is one. But think about how the plant looks itself. Think about cactuses and succulents. What is it about them?
It can take a lot of drying out over time.
But why? How do they do that?
Because they sit in the roots underneath the rocks.
Okay, so that's one answer. Long roots that go down deep. That's one trait. It's one of the survival skills of rock plants. Another one is succulents. Again, cactuses, they have fleshy leaves that store water. Some of them have fleshy stems. And so that's called succulents. Another one is we have, you see this false rosemary, the Conradina canescens? You see the leaves, they look kind of grayish. You know why? You know why they look grayish? They're hairy. They have white hairs all over them. White hairs reflect sunlight. And hairs in general hold water close to the stem. If you have a Latin species name and it says pilosa, hirsuta, tomentosa, canescens, or villosa, you have got a fuzzy plant. Those are all Latin words for fuzz or hairs or something. And chances are that might be a good rock garden plant, by the way. So here's an example, Conradina canescens. And you can also see in the inset, we have, I dug this up this winter, Liatris aspera. And you can see the roots, these are actually corm. These are called corms. I'm not sure, it's a swollen stem, I think. It might be a root. But I'm not a botanist. But that's how it's storing its water in the stem. So that's a succulent way of doing it. And the other answer, which I think some of you were hinting at, is slow growth and compactness. They're short. They tend to be short and they tend to grow slowly. And that's an important thing to know about rock plants. So I'm going to go through kind of quickly some examples of plants that you might want to consider for your rock garden, just so you can see some pretty plants. And I've already mentioned the Eastern Columbine, which acts like a biennial. Some places call it a perennial. It seeds out easily and gently. You can see the rock behind it. This particular photo that I have is not in the rock garden, but it's just a nice plant, and I love to see it in rock gardens. And there's a group of these that I call clay haters. And you absolutely cannot grow these in clay. Now, the North Carolina Piedmont native, and I actually have some growing on my neighbor's property naturally, is the fire pink Saline virginica. Absolutely won't grow in clay. It just will not. And if you want some, and I've tried to grow this for years and years and years and totally failed until I did these rock gardens. Now I can grow it. And then on the right is something called rayless goldenrod, which is a really interesting little, really tiny plant. It looks beautiful in the cracks and rocks. It's really a native to Georgia and Alabama and those Piedmont regions. It's called Bigeloia natalii. And it's just a beautiful little plant. Now the pink in there is a liatris, but it's got these yellow little blooms, and it only grows about 4 inches high. It's just a really neat little rock garden plant. But it is not a North Carolina native. If you really need North Carolina natives, you wouldn't want to use that one. Some more clay haters. Another plant I've tried to grow year after year after year is stiff aster, Ionactis linearifolia. And this is a beautiful plant. It clings to the rock. It's pretty lavender blooms in late summer. Just a gorgeous plant. And then the fame flower, Phemeranthus terretifolius, you cannot grow this anywhere except on stony, rocky areas. It will actually grow on granite domes. So, again, both of these are Piedmont natives. Sorry, too fast. Another one, pair here, is our bird's foot violet. Grows everywhere, all over North Carolina. This one's one I've had trouble with in my clay areas. It likes kind of dry soil, but it'll grow in full sun if it can get its roots under rocks. And it blooms quite a bit off and on during the summer. And this plant has just gotten very lush. It just loves it in this little spot. And on the right, I have one of these. I mentioned shale barrens, so I have a specialty plant. This is native to Virginia, West Virginia, boundary area in the shale barrens. Beautiful plant. And occasionally you'll see it. Ian Caton up at Floyd had one, and I just couldn't resist it. Very, very pretty plant, but it has to be in a rock garden. And then I have a couple of plants. The upland white goldenrod is a fairly short plant, about 8 to 12 inches tall. When it blooms, the rosette that it grows from is only about 4 or 5 inches tall. It looks nice in rocks. It's got a big Hypericum ginginoides pine weed behind it, but it's that white flower, very, very pretty. It's actually it's primarily a prairie plant. It grows in several counties in North Carolina, so it is a native here, but it is most prolific in the prairie areas. Very tolerant of dry soils. And then on the right is something called Cumberland rosemary. It's Conradina verticillata. It's really, really beautiful. And it clings to the rocks, and it's a low-growing plant. And it looks a lot like rosemary, honestly, but it's shorter and smaller. And it just loves to kind of crawl inside the rocks. That is native to the Cumberland Plateau in Kentucky and Tennessee, and also my rock garden.
Is that evergreen?
It is. And so it looks really nice in the winter. So there are some versatile plants that can grow elsewhere in your garden, but they do really well in rocks. And one of those are some of the shorter goldenrods. And one of those is the autumn goldenrod, Solidago spatulata. And I can't emphasize how much I like this plant. It doesn't spread real fast. It slowly grows and forms a little clump. And it's just beautiful. It will get, in the ground, it may get 10, 12 inches high or more of the blooms, but in the rock garden, I haven't seen much above 8 inches. And then another beard tongue, and here you see hirsutus. See that? The hairy beard tongue. Beautiful little plant, blooms in the spring. And this will seed out a little bit, so you can see it spreading around. I really like that one. That is a North Carolina native.
Do you transplant all these, or do you direct seed any of them, or are they self-seeding?
I do grow some from seed, but most of these I have purchased.
So you're not seeding them into the soil, to the rock?
Correct. I am generally transplanting them there. The first, I've been doing this for like 3 years, and most of them I've planted by hand. Now, the columbines are seeding out on their own, and I expect the penstemons will too. In fact, I already know they are. And I have some more coming up this year that are coming up from seeds already in the rock garden, so we'll see which plants they are. So that'll be exciting. These are more versatile plants that will grow in other environments, but they also love rock gardens. I couldn't believe the downy woodmint, Blephila ciliata. I have it growing in the woods, in moist woods. And for some reason, I just had a notion, gosh, I'm just going to stick one in the rock garden. And it's better. It's growing much better and more vigorously than it did in the woods. I don't know why
Full
that is.
sun, right?
In full sun. This is full sun. I'm taking this picture on a cloudy day, but it's in a full sun location. And then St. Andrew's Cross, which I have some native property that grows under pine trees. And it normally grows in the leaf mulch that's on top of the clay in my yard. And but I planted it straight out in between some rocks and sandy soil, and it's just thriving. Hypericum stradulum, really neat little plant. So it's just a lot of fun to grow these plants you can't grow any other way. We have the wild petunia, which you saw in the beginning of the presentation, and the heartleaf skullcap I've already mentioned, just two really nice plants in rocks. Both of these are North Carolina native. And then a group I call the closet stoners. You really don't think of these as being rock plants. The hairy lip fern is a little fern that normally occurs in rock. It likes to live in little cracks, and it can't stand afternoon sun. It needs a little bit of shade. But it will grow in morning sun. In a rock garden that's in full sun, if you've got a face that's facing north or east, it will grow in a little crack there. And then the ebony splingwort, which all of you should be familiar with. You probably already have it in your yard somewhere, even if you're in the city. This was actually growing in a tiny little crack in the rock I found in the woods, and I just moved the rock and the splingwort with it to the garden and had it facing north. I guess it's facing east because it's getting a little bit of sun there. And then there are some woodland plants, the hairy alum root. Again, put it on down low. It gets a little bit more water. So the top of the rock garden, and when I have a mound, is the driest. The edges are the wettest. So put it down near the edge. Put it where it gets a little bit of shade in the afternoon, or on the north side where it gets a little bit more shade. And these, they won't get very big, but they will be green all winter. They'll bloom a little bit, green all summer, and they'll bloom a little bit, and they're quite lovely. And I think this one is green a lot in the summer, in the winter too. I'm trying Tiarella huerrii, which is the bunching Tiarella, not the running one, this year, and I think it will probably be similar to this. So some more examples. All right, so we have. So the thing you want to do is go out and look at rocky places. If you go out and look at rocky places, you're going to see grasses and sedges. And so if you have a rock garden, you don't put grasses and sedges in it, I kind of go, it just doesn't look natural to me. It's got to have some grasses and sedges in it. So here's two really nice ones. Deer tongue grass grows everywhere. It grows in dry soils and wet soils. It grows in full sun. It grows in mostly shade. But it will grow. And again, I'll put it around the bottom of the rock garden. It will take some moisture. And then the brome-like sedge, again, in the maybe lower areas, because it does like a little bit of water, but it thrives where it can get its roots down underneath the rock. So you can go out in nature and find your own plants. This is probably one of the prettiest plants I never heard of, and no one ever told me about. And I saw it growing in a road cut in a development in Bamboo Gap, North Carolina. It's near Boone. And I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a sedge. You see how fine the leaves are? And it looks a lot like a sedge. And in the rock garden, it just turns this deep green color all winter long. It is a cool season grass, and it's green all winter long, and it's beautiful. And look at it with the rock. I just think that's a beautiful picture of it. You got the rock, the sun's on part of it, something's yellow in the background, and then you've got this deep green color. It's just beautiful. Avenella flexuosa, none of you have heard of it probably. And the funny thing is it's not exactly a rare plant. It occurs all over North Carolina. It occurs all over North Carolina, all over Europe, and all over Asia. It's a circumpolar global species. So it's just a really, really nice grass that no one has ever heard of. So go out and explore. You always find things that you never hear about. I've seen it in one catalog of a wholesaler, but they're out of stock right now.
So you dug this from the roadside to transplant it?
I don't admit to anything.
Well, let me rephrase that. You had difficulty buying it from.
So my defense is, I once went to a carnivorous plant convention in California, and I went on a field trip looking at Darlingtonia. That's a carnivorous plant that grows only in Northern California and Oregon. And I was with a very famous North Carolina botanist by accident. He just happened to be on the same field trip, who loved carnivorous plants. And he turns to me and says, there's nothing against the law about collecting a plant from a roadside. There's nothing illegal about collecting a plant from a roadside right-of-way. He says, you don't want to do it in front of somebody's house, but there's nothing illegal about it. That's my defense. Now that guy, who I didn't know at the time, but have learned since, was Larry Mellichamp. So Larry said it. I didn't say it. Larry said it. Rest his soul. And he was just a delight to go botanizing with, and an expert on Western plants as well as Eastern. Let's just go to the next one real quick. Get it going. The big and tall plants are, you need to put them in the back of your rock garden. Now, some people, you have a slope. You have a slope in your yard, and you can pile rocks and gravel on that, and you have this pretty big area. You just pile your rocks and gravel on that, and these you could grow on that slope. Or you can put them in the back of your rock garden. I made a mistake of putting a couple of them in the rock garden. Of course, they got too big. Learned by experience. But they are great plants that will grow in rock just beautifully. You do not want to overwater. The Baptisia will tolerate most anything, but the Georgia asters and the blazing stars, you do not want to overwater them. So here's a mystery plant. I call it a rock prankster. It starts to bud up in August, and then I go on vacation, and I miss it in full bloom. So here it is in bud. And I didn't get to see it in full bloom because it likes to fool me. When I'm on vacation, it goes in full bloom, and I don't see it till I come back and it's finished. In the rock garden, it's trimmed by deer. My plants deer do come along and trim some of them. This is one they will trim. They will trim it all in June and July, and then they stop trimming it, and then it blooms. I don't know why that is. But it's kind of nice. It makes it more compact than you might see otherwise. Now, this plant gets fairly tall if you see it on the roadside. It grows all along the North Carolina roadside. It's a native plant. Anybody know what it is? Yeah, Maryland aster. But I bet you haven't seen a Maryland aster that looks like this on the roadside. It loves the rock garden. It loves it. And I mean, really, I was just amazed at it, and I'm so mad I didn't get to take a picture of it when it was in full bloom. So we have NSFW plants, not suitable for rocks. Slender golden top, one of my favorite wild natives, grows along the roadsides. I love this plant, but it spreads too much. Monarda punctata, I've actually put that in my rock garden. You can see the rocks around it, and I'm deeply regretting it. So it has runners. But I put it there because I can never, I've tried to grow this year after year after year, and it's one of these that has to have super well-drained soil. And you can see it's blooming quite well, but it needs, and it tolerates full sun, but it spreads too much, so I'm kind of moving it off to the side. And again, these could grow on a slope. If you had a big slope, you could plant them where they can spread around, they could do just fine. So we'll talk a little bit about good rock keeping maintenance, how to keep your garden. It's similar to any other garden. I water only when it's very dry. I do not fertilize. Frequent watering or any fertilization causes too much top growth, and it makes the roots don't grow deep enough, and you don't want that. You want these things. So only water them when they're very, very dry, and you don't need to fertilize them. Weed prevention is really easy. The weeding of these things, I weed by hand, it's really been easy because you've got the rock there's no weeds on the rock, and then in the cracks you do get some weeds, but pretty easy to pull them out. So it's a lot easier for me than weeding a regular garden. And some in my higher ones, it's easier to get to them. When I've piled it up, it's very easy to reach over and pull them out. One thing is, rock plants are small, many of them. And it is important to remove fall leaves. And you want to remove the seed stems. Now, I wait until like January, February, and then I trim off the seed stems because they still have seeds in them. And so I'll put the seed stems out in the yard so the birds can still get to the seeds. But I take them off because you want sunlight to get to those crowns. And like all the other plants that you notice now in your yards, they're all starting to break dormancy. And they need that light on those crowns. And these are short plants. So it's really important to remove those seed stems in mid to late winter. And so we can talk a little bit about how to design it. You can see a little bit of my patio on the far upper right. I had this old bird bath that was cracking up and the base was broken. The base is actually buried underneath it. This is on top of an old pine tree stump. And I just took the bowl, and set it on a bunch of sand and rock that was piled on the tree stump. And then we have the rayless goldenrod is off to the right-hand side, upper right near the bowl. Down at the bottom you can see the upland white goldenrod. And off here to the left, it's sun's hitting that green, light green. It's the pineweed or Hypericum ginginoides. So I think it's just fun to see the rock. Got a nice little bird bath and plants. This makes for a pretty arrangement. It takes some time to enjoy it. You get a nice parade of colors. But one thing I like, someone just sent me a picture of somebody who's doing a presentation for J.C. Ralston, and they have this huge stones, beautiful stone. They're massive. They've obviously done a rock garden with heavy cranes and whatever. And they've got a lot of non-native plants, and they're all little rocky plants, and they've got reds and yellows and purples and oranges, and they have this rainbow colors. You never see that in the wild. And I really like my rock gardens to look kind of natural. And so here we have lavenders and yellows. And to me, this is like you'd be walking down a trail or in the mountains, and you might see something that looks kind of like this. And this is the way I like my garden to look. This is why I got into native plants. Simple colors, and it's a beautiful contrast against the rock. You can see a little pathway up there behind it, and part of the shale-bearing garden up behind it. And it's also fun both with photography and just to kind of get eye level with these things. You can see I live on a pond that's a little bit behind it. Here we have Georgia asters, which again have gotten a little bit rambunctious, but they're beautiful, and I'm going to keep them out of the main part of the rocks. Just a real pretty little picture there. And in the fall, so fall is a great time for rock gardens. The rock is pretty. The seed heads. Anybody know what the lower right, those beautiful tan seed heads are? Anybody want to guess? Huh?
Maryland Gold Ash?
Yes, it is. It's just beautiful. So it was beautiful when it bloomed, and it's beautiful in seed, and it's like this all winter.
And this time of year, it'll still be holding on to some of this.
Yeah, I had to cut these off. I finally did because I had to make room for the sun to get to the plant. But wow, it's just a beautiful plant, and it just looks pretty all year long. I love it. Now the other seeds are these in particular, this is the Liatris microcephala. This is probably another Liatris. The Georgia aster is still blooming. This was probably November-ish. So it's just pretty to see it in the fall. And all right, so this is just a list of sources. This is not official North Carolina Native Plant Society recommended nurseries. These are just nurseries where I have gone and found plants that I use. We've got some of our members, John Neals, I'll put him up here, and a number of his plants are in my garden. Adam works at Frank's Perennial Border. I've used several of their plants in my garden, and most of these others. These are just sources. A lot of places that sell native plants do not have very many rock garden plants. And so this is a list of places where I have found a good number of rock garden plants. So I'm not being critical of any other nurseries. This is just where I have found them. This is not official North Carolina Native Plant Society. I encourage you, if you want to take a picture of it, that's fine. But don't, it's no endorsement by anyone. I've just bought plants from here, just for you to have ideas. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
I've got 2 plants that you haven't shown pictures of, and I'm just wondering if you or anybody else. Asclepias tuberosa, do you think it would do well?
Absolutely.
And New Jersey tea?
Now, I would caution you about shrubs, even dwarf shrubs. And there's probably a dwarf New Jersey tea. I know there's a dwarf 9-bark. A dwarf shrub, even after 6-7 years, is going to be 5 feet across. And that's too big. A New Jersey tea doesn't grow real fast, but eventually it's going to be 5 feet across. And you're going to have to pull it out. So I would say I'm not putting any shrubs, big shrubs. Now, what I call ground-hugging shrubs, the Hypericum stragulum is technically a shrub. The St. Andrew's cross is technically a shrub. The Conradinas that you saw, a couple of them here, the Cumberland rosemary and all, those are technically shrubs. So those are great because they don't get 5 feet across. But I wouldn't do the big ones, even if they're dwarf. Good question. I think there was a question over here somewhere, maybe. No? Anything else?
The definition of a dwarf shrub is very, very slow growing. Doesn't mean it won't get humongous.
And there are probably a couple other what I would call ground cover shrubs. Oh, low bush blueberries. I think you could try those. And some of them might require the Conradinas require some trimming to keep them small. They do require some trimming. But this is, they're just slow growing. They eventually get big. It's a good point. Anything else? Well, this is a great turnout for a rainy night, so thank you all for coming.